In Haiti, hundreds of prisoners escaped on Saturday night and early Sunday morning from the national prison in Port-au-Prince. In South Korea, thousands of senior doctors marched on Sunday in the country's capital in support of their fellow trainees who are on strike against government policies. And the Palestinian Red Crescent Society demanded the release of 14 of its workers detained for over 3 weeks by Israel's regime. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from TeleSUR Studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Haiti, hundreds of prisoners escaped on Saturday night and early Sunday morning from the national prison in Port-au-Prince after gangs took control of the detention center. Regime.teleSUR, aka Baby Q, one of the leaders of the violent gangs, unleashed a war in the capital aiming to overthrow the government. After assaulting the police barrier, the armed gangs took control of the prison, from where strong bursts of fire have been heard. The Colombian mercenaries accused by the magnitude of Jovenel Moise held in that prison made a desperate call at the time of the taking. The rector of office of Haiti's State University condemned an attack against one of the campuses carried out by an armed group operating in Port-au-Prince, the country's capital. The board reported that the violent event occurred against the Agronomy and Veterinary College, where a student was wounded by a gunshot on Thursday. The rector's office of the university denounced the plundering in the student residence and other areas of the college. Police authorities confirmed that the criminals stole valuable items such as solar panels, computers, mattresses, and other essential equipment from the institution. In Panama, workers denounced shortcomings in the educational system in the run-up to the start of the school activities. Unions warned in a statement that more than 3,000 educational centers in the country are not ready to open their doors due to the security and infrastructure conditions, in addition to the lack of teachers, and the increase in school enrollment in the public education system as a result of the migration of students from private schools. This and the inflationary crisis put at risk the access to education of more than 10,000 students. In Venezuela, the National Registry of Artists of the Great Mission Viva Venezuela, Mi Patria Querida, continues. Artists from different municipalities nationwide gathered in the Bolivar Square of the state of the country to participate in the Great Day of Registration, which will be held until April 20th. In the midst of joy and union, they expressed their gratitude to President Nicolás Maduro and Commander Hugo Chavez for vindicating the cultural identity of Venezuela. In addition, they invite all those who perform any artistic, artisanal, or cultural expression to register to exalt the Venezuelan tradition. In Mexico, presidential candidate for the ruling Morena party, Claudia Sheinbaum, kicked off her 2024 campaign in Mexico City's Zócalo Square. She vowed to continue the legacy of incumbent President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Sheinbaum starts her campaign ahead of the polls with 51.6% of the voting intention. She said next June Mexicans will be choosing between two alternatives: to continue a path of transformation or to return to corruption. She went over some of her campaign promises, which include turning Mexico into a fair, honest, free, participatory and responsible country, advocating fraternity and promoting education, humanism and science, and improving the health system, salaries and strengthening the justice system, also promoting culture and access to housing. The Honduran government presented proposals for the defense, independence and sovereignty of the peoples in the framework of the 8th Summit of the Community of Latin America and the Caribbean States. Honduran President Xiomara Castro, during the summit held in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, assumed the pro tempore presidency of the regional bloc and presented several proposals to carry out the Patria Grande project. The head of state proposed that the organization should continue the struggle to achieve the end of the blockade and the unilateral measures imposed by the United States against Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. She also proposed to accompany Argentina in its claim for the Maldives Islands and to promote an open discussion of the political and territorial situation of Puerto Rico. The president affirmed that these projects are based on the dream of independence heroes such as Simón Bolívar, José Martí, and Francisco Morazán. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at @TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. All the stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. In Russia, defense authorities say stormtroopers managed to capture Ukrainian strongholds in Zaporozhye. According to a statement issued by the Defense Ministry on Saturday, Russian paratroopers seized strongholds of the Ukrainian army near Vervovoi. According to the statement, during the assault, paratroopers were supported by aviation fire. The Russian Defense Ministry said that the Ukrainian army was unable to rebuke the attack, and after the enemy positions were surrendered, several Ukrainian soldiers were captured. Zaporozhye Governor Yevgeny Balitsky said that the Russian troops have a clear artillery advantage in the region. Meanwhile, in Crimea, police have confirmed that they deactivated a homemade explosive placed in a car headed to a checkpoint in Crescent in the north of the peninsula. According to the authorities, the device components were of foreign manufacture, supplied to Ukraine by NATO member countries. At the moment, police are investigating and conducted raids to determine the circumstances and the identity of those responsible. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov gave a press conference at the end of his visit to Turkey, describing as a blatant self-exposure a recording of confidential army talks on the Ukraine conflict.
This is a blatant self-exposure. This is a self-denunciation in the military field of a level comparable to that in the political field when Merkel, Holland, and Poroshenko admitted that no one was going to implement the Minsk agreements. The situation clearly indicates that the war camp in Europe is still very, very strong. The latest statements by both French President Emmanuel Macron and U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and the conversation between German generals still indicate that the war party does not want to change its course at all and wants to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia on the battlefield, and we acknowledge that.
The Russian Foreign Minister also said Moscow will act accordingly to face challenges that may appear as Sweden is on track to join NATO, following Finland, who became its member in 2023.
The conclusion that we made regarding our security is that we have already made organizational decisions, created the Moscow Military District and the Leningrad Military District. Additional weapons will be deployed there that will be adequate to the challenges that may appear on the territory of Finland and Sweden.
The Antalya Diplomacy Forum continues in Turkey, focused on the development of science and technology. The third edition of the forum continues with the participation of delegations from 147 countries to debate on diplomacy in times of crisis. As part of the agenda, talks are held with the participation of prominent figures such as the first Turkish astronaut, Alper Yeresasi, and the Turkish Vice President Sevet Yilmaz, who participated in the roundtable on the international trade, connectivity and independence. There is also a high-level session on women, peace and security Turkey with the leadership of the First Lady of Turkey, Emin Erdogan. In Zimbabwe, the government suspended a presidential activity on renewable energy due to a threat of terrorist attack in the province of Matabeleland. An airline located in the city of Victoria Falls alerted the authorities about a bomb threat directed to the country's airports, causing the immediate activation of the country's security system alarms. At the same time, investigations were initiated to determine the origin and credibility of the warning, while the General Director of Civic Aviation confirmed the temporary and preventive closure of all air terminals in the country. The United Nations Refugee Agency reinforced its support in Mozambique following the increase of violence and attacks by armed groups in the north of the country. According to the agency, the tensions in the province of Cape Delgado caused in the last few weeks the displacement of more than 70,000 people who fled their homes to the south. The rampant destruction of residential areas, schools, and other important facilities affected more than 56,000 people, while another 33,000 are taking refuge in the state of Nampula. The agency warned that more than a half of the displaced are vulnerable populations such as children, women, disabled people, and elderly. In South Korea, thousands of senior doctors marched on Sunday in the country's capital, Seoul, in support of their fellow trainees who are on strike against government policies. The march is in response to the latest threat from the executive, which has set a deadline for the strike to end, or else they will face severe sanctions. For almost 2 weeks, medical doctors have been protesting against the government plan to drastically increase the number of med students enrolled at universities. They say the measure will not necessarily solve the deficit of doctors, whereas it may be in detriment of the quality of the training they would receive. The government said that as of this Monday, it could begin to suspend licenses to all 9,000 striking doctors.
The shortage of medical personnel can be solved by changing current policies rather than by increasing the number of doctors. To put it simply, 5 years ago, there was a shortage of 3,000 doctors a year, a total of 15,000 doctors. At that time, Korea's population was larger and there were many more pediatric patients. This phenomenon did not exist even 5 years ago, when the birth rate was twice as high. So the problem is policy, not the number of doctors. But the government is misleading the public by saying that this phenomenon is due to a shortage of doctors and is putting doctors in a negative light.
We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Final short break. Don't go away. The Palestinian Red Crescent Society demanded the release of 14 of its workers detained for over 3 weeks by Israel's regime. The organization called on the international community to intervene and putting heavy pressure on Israeli authorities to secure the release of its employees, including 7 who are being held inside the Al-Amal hospital. The organization described its concern as being mainly due to the fact that after their arrest, no contacts could be established to reveal their health condition or their whereabouts. The Red Crescent has repeatedly reported the attacks launched by Tel Aviv against ambulances, medical centers, and health personnel. Meanwhile, the United Nations Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Middle East, UNRWA, denounced the systematic Israeli attacks against humanitarian workers and journalists in the Gaza Strip and warned that the largest number of assassinations of these professionals has been registered compared to any other conflict. According to medical sources in Gaza, over 30,400 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli occupation forces since October 7, 2023. In Cuba, citizens rallied on Saturday in support of Palestine and demanded an end to the Israeli genocide in the Gaza Strip. President Miguel Díaz-Canel led the main demonstration organized by several social movements in response to the escalation of the Israeli aggression against the city of Rafah. The Cuban people marched from the provincial capitals, including Havana, where they raised their voices for the citizens in the Gaza Strip. President Miguel Díaz-Canel assured that Cuba will never be indifferent to the Israeli genocidal crimes against Palestine.
Millions of reasons will always shine through to continue the struggle. To run, to walk, to cry, to embrace, to love, to suffer, to help, to cry out. In life there are many verbs. I am simply Palestine. My verb is to fight. Long live free Palestine. Long live Gaza.
During the event, the participants expressed their support for the Palestinian people and insisted on the need to end the genocide that Israel carries out against Palestine.
The Cuban people, forced in resistance, have the imperious need to join in all of the just causes. Today we are searching for peace, harmony, and justice, and a better world for all. This world is the ship where all humanity travels, and we have the responsibility to create the basis of coexistence, respecting the rights of all human beings. It shall be the will of the man of these times to gain civic and social awareness, to defend individuals from anything that may hinder their rights, from anything that may take away their rights and deprives them of the will to grow and forge a fair and prosperous nation. The Cuban people has always been sympathetic, and we cannot turn our backs on a people who's suffering a genocide of such a magnitude. This is a situation in which we can all find ourselves one day. I have often wondered what would happen if I were to wake up and find my people like this. It is a suffering that we young people also feel, and that is why we are here in this struggle. It is impossible to be indifferent to what is happening, to ignore this is a genocide and not accuse those who are committing this massacre. We must stop the war. We must stop it once and for all. We want peace and justice. We want the Palestinians to have the right to live in their land and to live in peace.
Also in Venezuela, citizens and political leaders joined the voices expressing support for the Palestinian people with a mobilization in the January 23rd parish. Under the slogan "Long Live Free Palestine," social, popular and political organizations gathered in the commune of El Panal 2021 to rally in support of the Palestinian people. Protesters demand the end of the Israeli genocide in the Gaza Strip and denounce the complicity of the United States in the violent Israeli actions.
We are in the community El Panal 2021, all the social movements of the Western Caracas. We are here in the heart of Caracas neighborhoods, denouncing since yesterday. We are mobilized with a call that we made yesterday at 7 p.m., asking for the end of the genocide that the invading army of Israel is perpetrating in the Palestinian territory. We denounce that this systematic massacre of the Palestinian people for more than 70 years, it is not a war, it is a massacre. We emphasize that the thousands of people killed are mostly women and children. We emphasize that the Palestinian territory has no army. It is not a war, it is a massacre.
The Executive Secretary of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our Americas People's Trade Treaty, Jorge Arriaza, rejected the ongoing resurgence of fascism and the Holocaust.
We reject fascism and Nazism, but we also have to reject this Holocaust in real time. Latin America is speaking out. We will continue in the streets exerting pressure so that the institutions and the great powers of the world take action and put an end to such painful events that make us cry in our homes.
Jorge Arriaza called on the United Nations to put pressure on the elites to put an end to the genocide in Gaza, which dates back to over 70 years.
We call on the United Nations and the ruling elites of the United States to put an end to this barbarism. Public opinion around the world, even within the United States and even within Israel, rejects the atrocities that are being committed over and over. Therefore, we must remain on the streets. We must continue exerting pressure until we achieve our objective, to put an end to this situation which did not start on October 7th, but 76 years ago, the continued siege of the people of Palestine.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.